"You don't belong in this line, sweetie. Economy is back there near the toilets." That was the sentence that ended Bailey Miller's 20-year career, though she didn't know it yet. She stood at the gate of Flight 492 to Zurich, sneering at 19-year-old Maria, ripping the first-class boarding pass right out of her trembling hand. Bailey thought she was just putting an uppity teenager in her place. She didn't know that the girl she was humiliating wasn't just a passenger. She was the daughter of Matthew Sterling, the director of the International Aviation Safety Board, the man who literally wrote the rule book this airline had to follow to keep its license. Within an hour, that gate wouldn't just be closed, the entire terminal would be locked down, and Bailey would learn exactly what happens when you mess with the wrong family. The fluorescent lights of JFK International Airport hummed with that specific, headache-inducing frequency that only weary travelers seem to hear. Maria Sterling shifted the weight of her backpack, pulling the sleeves of her oversized Yale hoodie down over her hands. She was exhausted. Finals week had been a blur of caffeine and late-night library sessions, and all she wanted was to get to Zurich, meet her parents for the winter break, and sleep for 14 hours straight. She stood in the priority lane for Swiss Air Flight 492. The carpet beneath her feet was a plush red, distinct from the thin, grey industrial looping of the economy queue next to it. Maria clutched her passport and her printed boarding pass, seat 1A. It was a gift from her father. Matthew Sterling had been travelling for work in Europe for the last month, overseeing the new turbulent weather safety protocols that were being rolled out across the Atlantic fleet. He had used his accumulated miles and status to treat his daughter, knowing how hard she'd studied. "Sit up front, Peanut," he'd texted her. "Sleep well. I'll see you on the ground." Maria adjusted her glasses. She knew she didn't look like the typical first-class passenger. Most of the people around her were men in bespoke Italian suits checking Rolexes, or women with Louis Vuitton luggage sets that cost more than Maria's tuition. Maria was wearing leggings, beat-up Nike Dunks, and her hair was in a messy bun. She looked like a student. She looked young. And, importantly for what was about to happen, she was black. The line moved forward. At the podium stood 2 gate agents. One was a younger man, typing furiously and looking stressed. The other was a woman in her late 50s with a stiff, bleached blonde bob and a name tag that read, "Bailey, Senior Gate Lead." Bailey had the kind of eyes that scanned the crowd looking for infractions rather than solutions. When the businessman in front of Maria scanned his pass, Bailey gave him a saccharine smile. "Have a wonderful flight, Mr. Henderson. Champagne is waiting for you." Mr. Henderson grunted and walked through. Maria stepped up. She held out her phone with the QR code and her passport. Bailey didn't look at the phone. She looked at Maria's shoes, then her leggings, then the hoodie. Her gaze lingered on Maria's face with an expression that soured instantly, like she'd just bitten into a lemon. "Can I help you?" Bailey asked, her voice dropping an octave, losing all the warmth she'd shown Mr. Henderson. "Checking in," Maria said, her voice soft. She held the phone closer to the scanner. Bailey's hand shot out, covering the scanner glass. "This is the priority lane, miss. Group 1 and 2 only. General boarding for Group 5 hasn't started yet. You need to wait in the seating area." "I know," Maria said, trying to be polite. "I'm in Group 1, Seat 1A. Bailey let out a short, sharp laugh, a bark of disbelief that made several people in the economy line turn their heads. "Group 1? Honey, Group 1 is for full fare first class and global services members." "I know," Maria repeated, feeling the heat rise in her cheeks. "Here is my boarding pass." She tried to move her hand to scan it again, but Bailey snatched the paper boarding pass Maria was holding as a backup from her other hand. She squinted at it, scrutinizing the ink as if looking for a forgery. Sterling. Bailey read the name aloud, her tone dripping with skepticism. She typed something into her terminal. Her acrylic nails clicked aggressively against the keys. I don't see a Maria Sterling in our premium manifest. It should be there, Maria said, her heart starting to hammer. My father booked it. Oh, your father booked it, Bailey mocked, loud enough for the business-class passengers behind Maria to hear. A man in a grey suit sighed loudly, checking his watch. And let me guess, he used his miles, or did he have a friend in the system? He bought the ticket, Maria said, firming up. Please just scan the code. It will work. Bailey leaned over the podium, invading Maria's personal space. Listen to me. I have been working this gate for 20 years. I know what a first-class passenger looks like, and I know when someone is trying to pull a fast one with a doctored pass or a buddy pass they aren't eligible for. We have strict dress codes and conduct policies for the front of the plane. There is no dress code for paying passengers, Maria argued. She knew this. Her dad had taught her the passenger Bill of Rights when she was 12. There is for disruptive ones, Bailey snapped. And right now, you are holding up the line and disrupting the boarding process. I'm not disrupting anything. You're the one not scanning my ticket. Bailey's face went red. She pointed a long, manicured finger toward the back of the terminal. Step aside. Now, I am going to process the actual priority passengers, and then I will deal with you and your situation. If you don't move, I'm calling security. But I have a ticket, Maria pleaded, looking around for help. The younger agent kept his head down, terrified of Bailey. The passengers behind her just looked annoyed, avoiding eye contact. Security! Bailey shouted, waving to a TSA officer standing near the food court. We have a non-compliant passenger at gate 42. Maria froze. The shame was sudden and icy. Everyone was staring. She wasn't a criminal. She was an honors student. She was just trying to go home. Fine, Maria whispered, tears stinging her eyes. I'll step aside. She moved out of the red lane, standing awkwardly by the wall, clutching her backpack straps. She watched as Bailey waved the man in the grey suit forward. So sorry for the delay, sir, Bailey cooed, her voice transforming back to syrup. Just some people trying to jump the queue. You know how it is. Terrible, the man muttered, glancing at Maria with disgust. They should screen them better before they get to the gate. Maria stood there, isolated and small, while the line of wealthy, mostly white passengers filed past her. She felt like she was shrinking. But in her pocket, her hand gripped her phone. She didn't text a friend. She didn't open Instagram. She opened her contacts and pressed the favorite listed as Dad. The phone rang 3 times. Maria, everything okay? You should be boarding by now. Her father's voice was warm, steady, the voice of a man who solved disasters for a living. Hearing it made Maria's composure crack. A single tear rolled down her cheek, hot and humiliating. Dad, she choked out. They won't let me on. There was a pause on the other end. The background noise on her father's side, the clinking of silverware, the hum of a convention center, stopped instantly. Who won't let you on? Did you miss the window? No, Maria sniffled, turning her back to the gate so Bailey wouldn't see her crying. I was in line. The lady, the gate agent. She said I don't belong in first class. She said I was disrupting the line. She called security, Dad. She took my paper pass and won't scan my phone. She said what? Matthew Sterling's voice dropped. It wasn't loud. It was terrifyingly quiet. It was the voice he used when a plane part failed a stress test. Did she give you a reason? She said I don't look like I belong. She made fun of my hoodie. She thinks the ticket is fake. Stay right there, Matthew said. Do not leave the gate area. Do not get angry. Do not give them a reason to arrest you. I need you to be the calmest person in that airport. Can you do that for me, Peanut? I can, Maria whispered. Where are you? I'm closer than you think. I was at the Hilton JFK for the Safety Board annual gala. I'm in the car. I'm 5 minutes out. Put the phone on speaker. Walk up to the agent and just ask for her name. That's it. Just her name. Dad, she's really mean. She has the police coming. Get her name. The line went dead. Maria took a deep breath. She wiped her face with her sleeve. She channeled every ounce of dignity she had. She walked back to the podium. The boarding was almost finished. The economy line was dwindling. Bailey was currently berating a young mother whose stroller was too wide for the jet bridge. When she saw Maria return, her eyes bulged. I told you to wait for security, Bailey hissed. 2 Port Authority officers were now making their way down the concourse, walking briskly toward them. I just need your name, Maria said, her voice trembling but audible. And your employee ID number. Bailey laughed. It was a cruel sound. Oh, you want my name? You want to report me? Honey, go ahead. I'm Bailey Miller, senior lead. And you are not getting on this plane. In fact, she turned to the approaching officers. Officers, over here. This passenger is refusing to follow crew instructions and is harassing staff. The officers, 2 burly men named Officer Kowalski and Officer Ruiz, stepped up. They saw a small black girl in a hoodie and a frantic-looking, middle-aged white woman in a uniform. Their bias kicked in on autopilot. Miss, you need to step back, Officer Kowalski said, hand resting near his belt. Come with us. You're causing a disturbance. I'm not, Maria said, raising her hands. I have a valid ticket. She refuses to scan it. She is trespassing, Bailey lied, feeling the power surge through her. I voided her ticket. She is no longer a passenger. Now she is trespassing in a secure federal zone. That's it, Kowalski said, reaching for Maria's arm. Let's go, miss. Don't make us cuff you. Wait, Maria cried out. My father is coming. He's with the Aviation Board. Yeah, and my dad is the King of England, Bailey scoffed. Get her out of here so we can close the doors. Captain wants an on-time pushback. Officer Kowalski grabbed Maria's upper arm. His grip was tight. Walk, now. They began to drag her away from the gate. Maria stumbled, her sneakers squeaking on the linoleum. Passengers inside the jet bridge were craning their necks to watch. A few held up phones, recording the unruly passenger being evicted. Please, Maria yelled. Check the system. My name is Maria Sterling. Quiet, Officer Ruiz said. They had dragged her about 20 feet down the concourse, away from the gate, when a booming voice echoed through the terminal. It wasn't over the intercom. It was projected from the lungs of a man who was used to shouting over jet engines. Unhand her! The command was so authoritative, so loud, that Officer Kowalski actually stopped. The entire gate area froze. Striding down the concourse wasn't just a dad, it was a phalanx. Leading the pack was Matthew Sterling. He was a tall man, 6'3", wearing a tuxedo from the gala he had just left. His bow tie undone, his dress coat flapping behind him like a cape. But it wasn't just him. Flanking him were 3 other men in suits, and trailing them were 2 TSA high-level supervisors and the airport duty manager, a woman named Mrs. Higgins, who looked pale as a ghost. Matthew didn't run. He marched. His eyes were locked on Officer Kowalski's hand on his daughter's arm. I said, Matthew growled, closing the distance in seconds, take your hands off my daughter. Now. Kowalski blinked, confused by the tuxedo and the entourage. Sir, step back. This is a police matter. No, Mrs. Higgins, the airport duty manager, squeaked out, rushing forward to cut off the police. "Officer, let her go! That is Director Sterling. That is the director of the safety board." Kowalski's eyes went wide. He let go of Maria's arm as if it were red hot. Maria ran to her father. Matthew caught her, wrapping one massive arm around her, but his eyes never left the police officers, and then they shifted, locking on to Bailey Miller, who was standing at the podium, her mouth slightly open. "Are you hurt?" Matthew asked Maria quietly. "My arm hurts a little, but I'm okay," she whispered. Matthew nodded. He gently moved Maria behind him. He reached into his tuxedo jacket and pulled out a lanyard. It wasn't a standard ID. It was a Federal Aviation credential with a gold holographic chip. He held it up. "Officer," Matthew said to Kowalski, his voice icy calm, "you have detained a federal dependent without cause. You have laid hands on a minor without threat. I will deal with your precinct captain later. Right now, I want a perimeter around this gate. No one boards. No one leaves. Especially not her." He pointed a finger straight at Bailey Miller. Bailey's confident smirk was gone. She looked at the duty manager. "Mrs. Higgins. What is going on? This girl was unruly." "Shut up, Bailey," Mrs. Higgins hissed, walking up to the podium. "Just shut up." Matthew walked up to the podium. He placed his hands flat on the counter. He towered over Bailey. "You must be the gate agent who decided my daughter didn't look like she belonged in first class," Matthew said. There was a system error," Bailey stammered, backing up until she hit the wall. "Her ticket didn't show up. I was just following protocol." "Protocol?" Matthew repeated the word like it was poison. "I wrote the protocol, Ms. Miller." Chapter 4, Section 2. In the event of a boarding pass dispute, the agent shall verify identity via passport and secondary database check prior to denying boarding. Did you do that? The line was long. Did you do that? Matthew's voice roared. "No," Bailey whispered. "And now," Matthew said, turning to the duty manager, "I want the manifest for Flight 492. I want the load sheet, and I want the cockpit crew brought up here. Now." "Sir," the younger gate agent squeaked. "The pilot is doing pre-flight checks. We are scheduled to push back in 4 minutes." Matthew turned his head slowly to the young man. "Son, look at me. This plane isn't going to Zurich. This plane isn't going anywhere until I inspect every single inch of the compliance logs for this gate. This flight is grounded." He turned back to Bailey, who was now trembling. "You wanted to check her credentials?" Matthew said, leaning in. "Now I'm going to check yours. Let's see if you belong in this line." The atmosphere at Gate 42 had shifted from a busy travel hub to a crime scene. The air was thick with tension, heavy and suffocating. The boarding door was still open, but the flow of passengers had stopped completely. Inside the jet bridge, a murmur of confusion rippled backward into the plane. The captain, a seasoned pilot named Captain Reynolds, stormed up the ramp. He was a man who ran a tight ship, obsessed with on-time departures. He adjusted his hat, his face flushed with irritation as he emerged into the terminal. "What is the hold-up?" Captain Reynolds barked, not looking at the people, just looking for a uniform to yell at. "We missed our slot. We have to wait 20 minutes for a new pushback clearance. Bailey, get that door closed." He stopped. He saw the police. He saw the suits. And he saw a tall black man in a tuxedo standing behind the podium, scrolling through the gate agent's terminal like he owned it. "Who are you?" Reynolds demanded, stepping toward Matthew. "Get away from that computer. That is authorized personnel only." "Officer, why is this civilian touching airline property?" Matthew didn't look up. "This civilian," he said, his voice calm but carrying a dangerous weight, "is looking at your weight and balance sheet, Captain, and I'm noticing a discrepancy." "Excuse me?" Reynolds scoffed. You can't read a load sheet. Step aside." Mrs. Higgins, the duty manager, rushed to the captain's side. She looked like she was about to be sick. "Captain. Captain. Please. This is Director Sterling." The name didn't register immediately. "I don't care if he's the director of the PTA. We have a flight to catch." Matthew finally looked up. He straightened his back, turning to face the pilot. The recognition hit Captain Reynolds like a bird strike to the engine. He knew that face. He had seen that face in the mandatory quarterly safety training videos. He had seen that face on the cover of Aviation Week. This was the man who had the power to ground entire fleets if he didn't like the look of a bolt on a landing gear. "Director Sterling," Reynolds stammered, his posture deflating instantly. I didn't know you were on the passenger list." "I'm not," Matthew said. "My daughter is. Or she was, until your gate agent dragged her out by the police because she didn't like her hoodie." Matthew gestured to Maria, who was sitting on a waiting area chair, shaking, with Officer Ruiz now standing guard for her, rather than against her. Reynolds looked at Bailey. Bailey was pale, sweating through her makeup. "Is this true?" Reynolds asked Bailey. "She was disruptive," Bailey cried out, her voice shrill. "She was blocking the lane. I just prioritized the boarding efficiency." "Efficiency," Matthew repeated. He tapped the computer screen. "Captain, come look at this. You're worried about your departure slot. You should be worried about a federal felony." Reynolds walked behind the podium. Matthew pointed at the screen. "This is the transaction log for Seat 1A, Matthew explained, pointing to the lines of code. "At 1842, my daughter, Maria Sterling, scanned her ticket. The system accepted it. Green light. See that?" "Yes," Reynolds whispered. 2 seconds later, Matthew continued, his finger sliding down the screen. A manual override command was entered. Entry code BM lead. "That's you, Bailey Miller." Bailey said nothing. She was staring at her shoes. "The override wasn't for security risk," Matthew said, his voice rising so the crowd could hear. The override code used was duplicate booking, seat reassignment. And then, at 1844, 10 seconds later, Seat 1A was assigned to a Mr. Arthur Henderson. Upgrade. Complimentary. The crowd gasped. The businessman who had sneered at Maria earlier, Mr. Henderson, was already on the plane, sipping champagne in Maria's seat. Matthew turned to Bailey. "You didn't kick her off because she was disruptive. You kicked her off because you had a friend, or maybe a high-tipping regular, who wanted an upgrade. And you saw a young black girl in a hoodie and thought, she doesn't matter, she won't fight back, I can bully her. You thought she was an easy target." Matthew leaned in, close to Bailey's face. "You made a calculation. You traded my daughter's dignity for a favor to a businessman. That is not protocol. That is fraud. That is discrimination. And that is a violation of the Federal Carrier Access Act." Bailey was shaking violently now. Mr. Henderson is a Diamond member. You thought wrong," Matthew said. He turned back to the captain. "Captain Reynolds, under FAA Regulation 14 CFR Part 382, I am flagging this flight as non-compliant with passenger civil rights statutes. This plane is officially grounded until a federal auditor can review the entire manifest handling." "Director," Reynolds pleaded, "that could take hours. The cancellation, the costs." "Then you better get comfortable," Matthew said, cold as ice, "because I'm not just grounding the plane, I'm calling the Inspector General." The next hour was a blur of chaos for the airline and absolute vindication for Maria. Matthew was true to his word. He didn't just make a phone call, he activated a Code Red audit. Within 30 minutes, 3 men in dark windbreakers with the Department of Transportation insignia arrived at the gate. They weren't airport security, They were federal investigators. The passengers were ordered off the plane. The grumbling was loud, but it silenced quickly when they saw the scene at the gate. Mr. Henderson, the man who had taken Maria's seat, walked off looking confused, holding his glass of champagne. "What is going on?" he demanded. "I paid for a service." "Actually," Matthew said, stepping into his path, "you didn't pay for that seat, did you? You were in 4B. Business class. Nice seat. But you wanted first." Mr. Henderson looked at Bailey. Bailey said she'd take care of me. She said there was a no-show in 1A. "She lied," Matthew said. "The passenger was standing right in front of her. She had the police drag her away so you could stretch your legs." Mr. Henderson looked at Maria, who was still sitting in the chair, her eyes red. He looked at her Yale hoodie. He looked at the tears on her face. For the first time, the arrogance slipped from his face, replaced by a dawn of uncomfortable realization. He had been part of something ugly. I didn't know," Henderson muttered. "Ignorance is a luxury," Matthew said. "My daughter doesn't have that luxury." Meanwhile, the investigators were dismantling Bailey's digital life. They weren't just looking at today, they were looking at everything. "Director Sterling," one of the investigators called out. "You need to see this." Matthew walked over. The investigator had pulled up Bailey's history of manual overrides. "It's a pattern," the investigator said. "Look at this. 6 times in the last 3 months. In every single case, a passenger under the age of 25 or a passenger with an ethnic surname was bumped from first or business class due to system errors or behavioral issues. And in every single case, the seat was reassigned to a white male passenger with high loyalty status. Bailey, who had been sitting on a stool provided by the police, put her head in her hands. "It's not just racism," Matthew noted, reading the data. "It's bribery. Look at the notes. Customer-provided gift. Customer-provided voucher. She's been selling seats that belong to other people." The investigator nodded. "This is grand larceny and federal wire fraud." The duty manager, Mrs. Higgins, was sobbing quietly on the phone to corporate. She knew what this meant. The airline was going to face a fine in the millions. The bad PR would be catastrophic. And it was all because Bailey couldn't stand the sight of a black girl in first class. Matthew walked over to Bailey. The silence in the terminal was absolute. Hundreds of people were watching. Phones were recording. "Ms. Miller," Matthew said. 20 years, you said? Bailey looked up, her mascara running down her face. "Please," she whispered. "I have a pension. I'm 2 years away from retirement. Don't take my pension." "I don't have to take it," Matthew said. "You threw it away when you decided my daughter wasn't human enough for you to do your job." He turned to Officer Kowalski, the same cop who had grabbed Maria. "Officer," Matthew said, "I believe you have a suspect to arrest, and this time make sure you have the right one." The twist was delicious. Officer Kowalski, desperate to save his own skin and prove he wasn't part of the corruption, moved with aggressive speed. He pulled his handcuffs out. "Bailey Miller," Kowalski announced, his voice booming for the cameras. "Stand up. You are under arrest for fraud, discrimination under the Air Carrier Access Act, and filing a false police report." "No!" Bailey screamed as he pulled her hands behind her back. "You can't do this. I run this gate. I am the lead." "Not anymore," Mrs. Higgins said, stepping forward. She ripped the senior lead badge off Bailey's uniform. "You're fired, Bailey. Effective immediately." The click of the handcuffs was the loudest sound in the airport. As they marched Bailey away, down the same path she had forced Maria to walk, the crowd didn't stay silent. Someone started clapping. Then another. It wasn't a cheer of joy, it was the applause of justice. Bailey kept her head down, but the cameras caught every angle. She wasn't the powerful gatekeeper anymore. She was just a criminal in a polyester uniform. With Bailey gone, the energy in the terminal shifted from tension to something softer, but still awkward. The airline staff were scrambling. They had a grounded plane, a furious director of aviation safety, and a PR nightmare unfolding on TikTok. Mrs. Higgins approached Matthew and Maria. She looked terrified. "Director Sterling," she said, her voice trembling. We are so incredibly sorry. There are no words. We are prepared to offer Maria a full refund, plus a voucher for future travel and—" Matthew held up a hand. "Stop." He looked at Maria. She had stood up. She looked tired, but she wasn't crying anymore. She was watching her father with a look of awe. She knew he was important, but she had never seen him work. She had never seen him use his power like a sword to cut through the rot of the world. "Maria," Matthew said gently, "what do you want to do? We can go home. I can get a car. You don't have to fly today." Maria looked at the plane. She looked at the passengers who were waiting to reboard. She saw Mr. Henderson, who was looking at the floor, ashamed. "No," Maria said. Her voice was stronger now. "I have finals to recover from. I have a vacation to start. And I have a seat 1A. She looked at Mrs. Higgins. "I want to go to Zurich, on this flight, in my seat." "Of course," Mrs. Higgins said immediately. "Absolutely. We will board you first. We will escort you." "And," Matthew added, "I want the passenger manifest cleared of Mr. Henderson." "Excuse me?" Mr. Henderson perked up from the background. "You accepted a fraudulent upgrade," Matthew said. "You were complicit in the removal of a minor. You can take the next flight." In economy. Mr. Henderson opened his mouth to argue, saw the federal agent still standing there, and shut it. He grabbed his bag and walked away, defeated. Matthew turned to his daughter. He adjusted her hoodie strings, smiling softly. "You sure, Peanut?" "I'm sure," she said. "Okay," Matthew said. He turned to the crowd of onlookers. "Show's over. Let's get this bird in the air. Everyone check your tickets. We are boarding by the book this time." But the story wasn't over. As Maria walked toward the jet bridge, this time with the captain personally holding the door open for her, she didn't just walk. She glided. However, the hard karma Matthew had unleashed was barely getting started. The arrest at the airport was just the beginning of Bailey's nightmare. The video of her screaming, "I run this gate," while being handcuffed, had hit the internet. And the internet, as Bailey was about to find out, is undefeated. While Maria settled into seat 1A, sipping a sparkling cider brought to her by a trembling flight attendant, Bailey was sitting in a holding cell at the Queen's precinct. She was allowed one phone call. She called her husband, a man named Rick who worked in logistics. "Rick, you have to bail me out," she sobbed. "Bailey!" Rick's voice sounded strange, distant. "Where are you?" "I'm in jail. It was a mistake. Some bratty girl and her dad—" "Bailey!" Rick cut her off. "I just saw the video. It's on the news. It's on CNN, Bailey. Racist gate agent arrested for fraud. That's the headline. It's lies." "Is it?" Rick asked. "Because my boss just called me. He said he doesn't want the company associated with our name right now. He told me to take a leave of absence. You didn't just ruin your job, Bailey. You're wrecking us." The line went dead. Bailey stared at the phone. For the first time in 20 years, she wasn't looking down at someone. She was at the bottom, looking up, and the walls were closing in. Back on the plane, the captain's voice crackled over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Reynolds. We apologize for the delay. We had some administrative issues to resolve. We want to welcome our special guest in seat 1A, and thank her for her patience. We are cleared for takeoff." Maria looked out the window as the plane accelerated. She watched the terminal blur past. She saw the flashing lights of the police car that was likely transporting Bailey. She put her headphones on. She didn't play music. She closed her eyes, and finally, let herself breathe. But down on the ground, Matthew wasn't done. He was sitting in the back of his town car, his phone to his ear. "Yes," Matthew said into the phone. "I want a full audit of the entire airline's priority boarding hiring practices. I want to know who trained her. I want to know who supervised her. And get the legal team ready. We aren't suing for money. We're going to sue for policy change. We're going to make sure no girl in a hoodie ever feels like she doesn't belong in the front of the plane again." He hung up. He looked out the window at the plane, lifting into the sky. "Fly safe, Peanut," he whispered. For 3 weeks, Matthew and Elena Robinson lived in the eye of a hurricane. The world had seen the video. The clip of Sterling Vance screaming, stumbling, and threatening the crew had been viewed 200 million times across every platform from TikTok to the BBC. The public reaction was unanimous. Outrage. Aerolux, the airline that had marketed itself as the pinnacle of sophistication, was now a global punchline. The memes were relentless. "Flying Aerolux, bring a parachute and a lawyer," one popular tweet read. But while the court of public opinion was firmly on Matthew's side, the actual courts were a different beast. Matthew sat in the cramped living room of their Brooklyn brownstone, staring at a stack of thick, cream-colored envelopes. They weren't fan mail. They were legal summons. "Read it again," Elena said. She was pacing the kitchen, holding a cup of tea she hadn't taken a sip of in 20 minutes. Matthew rubbed his eyes. "It says, Sterling Vance is suing us for defamation, invasion of privacy, and tortious interference with business relations." "Interference?" Elena scoffed. "He interfered with the cockpit door." "He claims the video was selectively edited," Matthew read from the legal brief, his voice flat. "He claims I provoked him. He claims the turbulence was exaggerated by the pilot to make him look unstable. And because of my malicious upload, the acquisition deal fell through, costing him and his family's equity firm approximately $1.2 billion. And he's suing us for $50 million in damages." Elena stopped pacing. The silence in the house was heavy. They were successful professionals, an architect and a surgeon. But they didn't have $50 million. They didn't have $5 million. "It's a slap suit," said a voice from the laptop on the coffee table. Junior Strong, the journalist from the flight, was on FaceTime. "Strategic lawsuit against public participation. He knows he can't win on the merits, Matthew. He just wants to bleed you dry in legal fees until you retract the video and sign an NDA. "It's working," Matthew admitted, tossing the papers down. "Lawyers are asking for a $50,000 retainer just to look at the case. We have savings, but—" "Don't spend a dime of your own money," Junior said firmly. "Vance is betting on you being alone. He thinks you're just a couple from seat 34E. He forgot who else was on that plane." "Who?" "Me," Junior grinned. "And the flight crew, and the union." 2 days later, the fight moved from the internet to the imposing stone steps of the Southern District of New York courthouse. Vance had managed to post bail in London, an astronomical sum, and had flown back to New York on a private jet, not Aerolux, which was currently grounded by the FAA. He was trying to spin the narrative. He appeared on a cable news show, looking contrite, wearing a modest grey suit, claiming he had a negative reaction to medication, and that Matthew had stalked and harassed him for the entire flight. "I am a victim of cancel culture," Vance had told the sympathetic host. This man saw a wealthy individual and decided to destroy him for internet clout. It was a good performance. A segment of the public, the contrarians, the conspiracy theorists, started to turn. Was the video edited? Was Matthew an agitator? The comments on the YouTube video started to get nasty. Matthew and Elena arrived at the courthouse for the preliminary hearing. A swarm of reporters was waiting. Matthew, did you provoke him? Elena, is it true you asked for money before uploading the video? They kept their heads down, flanked by their new legal team. Junior had come through. She had connected them with the fierce civil rights firm, Hightower and Associates. The lead attorney, Rebecca Hightower, was a legend in New York. She was walking point, her heels clicking rhythmically on the pavement. Don't say a word, Rebecca whispered to them. Let him talk. He loves the sound of his own voice. Inside the courtroom, Sterling Vance sat at the plaintiff's table. He looked healthier than he had on the plane. His arrogance had returned. He smirked at Matthew, then leaned over to his lawyer, a man who billed $500 an hour, and whispered something that made them both chuckle. The judge, the Honorable Sarah P. Davies, banged her gavel. We are here to discuss the motion to dismiss the plaintiff's claims of defamation, Judge Davies said, peering over her glasses. Vance's lawyer stood up. Your Honor, the defendants destroyed a billion-dollar merger with a single, out-of-context video. My client suffered a medical episode, and Mr. Robinson exploited it for profit. We have affidavits from witnesses stating Mr. Robinson was aggressive at the gate. Which witnesses? Rebecca Hightower stood up, cool as ice. Mr. Arthur Henderson, the gate agent, Vance's lawyer said smugly. Matthew's heart sank. Henderson, the man who had bowed to Vance at JFK. Of course Vance had bought him off. Mr. Henderson claims Mr. Robinson was belligerent and threatening at the counter, the lawyer continued. This establishes a pattern of hostility. Judge Davies looked at Rebecca. Counsel? We would like to introduce a piece of evidence that contradicts Mr. Henderson's sudden recollection, Rebecca said. She held up a small USB drive. Is this the YouTube video? The judge asked. I've seen it. No, Your Honor, Rebecca smiled. This is something else. You see, Mr. Vance assumes that the only camera recording that day was my client's phone. He forgot about the airport. Vance's lawyer stiffened. We subpoenaed the security footage from JFK Terminal 4, Gate A12, Rebecca said. It has audio. Vance's face went pale. Rebecca played the clip on the courtroom screens. Grainy but clear footage showed the gate desk. It showed Matthew standing calmly. It showed Vance cutting the line. It showed Vance snapping his fingers at Henderson. And it picked up the audio perfectly. I have the airline. Economy fits your demographic better anyway. The racial slur, or the implication of it, hung in the silent courtroom. Then the footage showed the interaction with Henderson. It showed Matthew calmly accepting the tickets to avoid a scene. It showed zero aggression. Rebecca paused the video. As you can see, Your Honor, the only belligerence came from the plaintiff. And as for the medical episode on the plane, we have the toxicity report from the London police booking. She slapped a document on the table. Blood alcohol level was 0.24, 3 times the legal driving limit, plus traces of cocaine. That's not a reaction to medication, Your Honor. That's a Tuesday night for Mr. Vance. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Vance slumped in his chair, his face turning a mottled red. Order! Judge Davies shouted. She looked at Vance with undisguised distaste. Counselor, your motion for defamation is hanging by a very thin thread. But the claim regarding the destruction of business is still on the table. We will proceed to trial on the damages. Vance had lost the battle of character, but he was still coming for their financial throats. He was determined to prove that Matthew caused the airline's collapse, not his own behavior. It was a desperate Hail Mary, and it led to the most explosive trial New York had seen in years. The trial of Vance versus Robinson became a spectacle. It wasn't just about a plane ride anymore. It was about accountability. It was about whether a billionaire could crash a company and blame the passenger who filmed it. Aerolux had officially filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. 5,000 employees were out of work. Their pensions were frozen. The anger in the city was palpable. The courtroom was packed every day with former flight attendants, mechanics, and pilots, all glaring at the back of Vance's head. The defense strategy, Matthew's team, was simple. Truth is the absolute defense, they called their first witness. "I call Captain James Miller to the stand," Rebecca Hightower announced. Captain Miller walked in, wearing his full uniform, though the airline no longer existed. He looked tired but dignified. He took the oath. "Captain," Rebecca asked, "in your 30 years of flying, have you ever seen a passenger behave like Mr. Vance did on Flight 882? "Never," Miller said, his voice steady. "Mr. Vance's lawyers claim the turbulence caused him to fall, and that he was merely trying to steady himself near the cockpit door. Is that true?" "No," Miller said. "He was hammering on the door. He was screaming that he could fly the plane better than me. If Mr. Robinson hadn't stepped in and distracted him, I believe he would have breached the flight deck. In that turbulence, with the autopilot engaged, a struggle in the cockpit could have been catastrophic. We could have lost the airframe." "So Matthew Robinson didn't cause the danger?" "Matthew Robinson likely saved the lives of everyone on board," Miller said firmly. Matthew felt a lump in his throat. He looked at Eleanor. She was crying silently. Vance's lawyer tried to cross-examine, but Miller was unshakable. The jury, ordinary New Yorkers, was loving it. But the real twist came on the third day of the trial. Vance took the stand. He had to. He was losing, and his ego wouldn't let him stay silent. He believed he could charm the jury, or at least confuse them with business jargon. "Mr. Vance," Rebecca Hightower began, pacing in front of him, "you claim that the release of the video caused the Gulf investors to pull out, destroying Aerolux. Is that correct?" "Yes," Vance said, adjusting his tie. "Business relies on confidence. That video was a hit piece designed to shake that confidence." "So before the video, the airline was in perfect financial health?" "We had cash flow challenges," Vance admitted. "But the deal would have fixed them." "I see," Rebecca said. She walked back to her table and picked up a thick binder. "We received this morning, via discovery from the bankruptcy trustees, a series of emails sent from your personal account 2 days before the flight." Vance froze. "Would you like to read Exhibit G, Mr. Vance?" I don't recall," he stammered. "I'll read it for you," Rebecca said, turning to the jury. "To Chief Financial Officer. Subject, the life raft. Text, cook the books for the Dubai meeting. Move the debt to the shell company in the Caymans. If they see the real maintenance logs, they'll run. We just need to sign the deal and cash out before the FAA inspects the fleet." The courtroom went dead silent. "You weren't going to Dubai to save the airline," Rebecca said, her voice rising. "You were going there to commit fraud. You were going to sell a dying, dangerous airline to investors by lying about its safety record. The video didn't kill the deal, Mr. Vance. The truth did." "Objection!" Vance's lawyer screamed. "Privileged communication. It's not privileged if it's in furtherance of a crime," Rebecca shouted back. Vance stood up in the witness box. "I was saving the company. I am a job creator. You people don't understand how finance works. We understand fraud, Rebecca said coldly. And we understand that you were flying on a plane you knew had skipped safety inspections to save money. You risked your own life and the lives of my clients for a payout. The jury looked at Vance with pure loathing. That was the nail in the coffin. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. They returned a verdict that rocked the city. On the count of defamation, not guilty. On the count of interference, not guilty. But then came the countersuit verdict. Matthew had countersued for emotional distress and legal fees. Damages awarded to Matthew and Elena Robinson. $5 million. The courtroom exploded. People were cheering. Captain Miller shook Matthew's hand. Sarah, the flight attendant, hugged Elena. Vance sat alone at his table. His lawyers were already packing up, distancing themselves from the radioactive fallout. He looked small. The master of the universe was just a man in a suit with a criminal record pending and a bankrupt legacy. But the story wasn't quite over. As they walked out of the courthouse, into the blinding flashes of the paparazzi, Matthew saw a black car waiting. A man in a suit stepped out. It wasn't a lawyer. It was an executive from Emirates Air. "Mr. and Mrs. Robinson?" the man said, extending a hand. "My employers in Dubai watched the trial with great interest. They appreciate integrity, and they hate fraud." "Okay," Matthew said, confused. "They are looking to expand their architectural division for the new airport terminals," the man said, handing Matthew a card. "And they need a pediatric director for the new hospital wing. They'd like to fly you both out for an interview. Properly this time." Matthew looked at the card. Then he looked at Eleanor. "First class?" Eleanor asked, a smile playing on her lips. The man smiled. "Private suite, and I promise, no one will steal your seats." The weeks following the incident at JFK were a master class in how quickly a life can be dismantled when arrogance meets accountability. The video of Bailey Miller screaming, "I run this gate," while being cuffed by Officer Kowalski, didn't just go viral. It became a cultural touchstone. It was viewed 40 million times in 3 days. The hashtag #TalshBoardingGate was trending globally, right below the Super Bowl. But for Bailey, the internet fame was the least of her worries. The real nightmare was unfolding in the drab, wood-paneled interior of the Queens County Criminal Court. The airline, desperate to distance themselves from the PR nuclear bomb Bailey had detonated, didn't just fire her. They cooperated fully with the prosecution. They handed over 10 years of server logs, chat messages, and transaction histories. What the forensic accountants found turned a simple discrimination case into a racketeering scandal. Bailey stood before Judge Anthony Calabrese, a man known for his zero-tolerance policy on corruption. She looked nothing like the imperious gate agent who had terrorized Maria. She was wearing a grey cardigan that was too big for her. Her roots were showing, and she looked 20 years older. Her lawyer, a court-appointed public defender named Mr. Klein, tried his best. "Your Honor," he pleaded, "Ms. Miller is a grandmother. She has had a long career. This was a lapse in judgment brought on by the stress of the holiday season. We ask for probation." Judge Calabrese adjusted his glasses and looked down at the pile of evidence Matthew Sterling's team had helped compile. "A lapse in judgment?" the judge asked, his voice echoing in the silent courtroom. "Mr. Klein, I have a log here showing that your client accepted tips ranging from $50 to $500 on 47 separate occasions to bump paying passengers from their seats. She targeted students. She targeted the elderly. And, predominantly, she targeted people of color." The judge turned his gaze to Bailey. "You didn't just discriminate, Ms. Miller. You ran a fiefdom. You treated a federally regulated checkpoint like your own personal toll booth. You humiliated a young woman not because she broke a rule, but because she didn't fit your narrow, prejudiced definition of worthy. Bailey sniffled. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I just want to go home." "You stripped Maria Sterling of her dignity in front of hundreds of people," Judge Calabresi said. "You tried to have her arrested. You tried to ruin her future, to cover up your own fraud. That requires more than an apology." The gavel came down with a sound like a gunshot. "Bailey Miller, I hereby sentence you to 18 months in a federal correctional facility for wire fraud and civil rights violations. Furthermore, you are permanently banned from employment in any role involving transportation security or customer service at any port of entry in the United States. You are also ordered to pay restitution of $45,000 to the airline and a symbolic damages payment of $1 to Maria Sterling, as per the family's request." Bailey's knees gave out. She had to be held up by the bailiff. The Sterling dollar, as the media called it, was the ultimate power move. Matthew and Maria hadn't sued for millions. They didn't need Bailey's money. By asking for only $1, they made it clear. This wasn't about greed. It was about change. As Bailey was led away in handcuffs, weeping, she looked toward the back of the courtroom. Maria was there, sitting next to her father. Maria didn't smile. She didn't jeer. She just watched, her face calm and impassive. It was the look of someone who knew who she was and who didn't need a gate agent to validate her existence. Bailey locked eyes with her for a second, and in that moment, the crushing weight of her mistake finally hit home. She had thrown away her life because she couldn't handle a hoodie. 5 years later, the aviation world had changed. The Sterling Protocol was now industry standard, preventing the kind of unchecked bias that had once humiliated Maria. Maria Sterling walked through Zurich Airport, no longer the exhausted student in a hoodie. Now a top graduate of Yale Law, she wore a sharp navy blazer, carrying a portfolio for the International Human Rights Conference she was attending. "Dr. Sterling," the gate agent smiled, scanning her passport. "Welcome back. Seat 1A is ready." Maria took the pass. It felt heavy with history, but lighter in her heart. As she settled into the lounge, a news report on the cost of living crisis played on the wall-mounted TV. The camera focused on a fast food drive-through window in New Jersey. The worker looked aged, her skin leathery, her hair in a net. She was being berated by a customer for forgetting ketchup. It was Bailey. Stripped of her pension and blacklisted from corporate jobs, Bailey was now part of the invisible class she had once despised. "You work your whole life," Bailey told the reporter, wiping grease from her brow, "and one mistake takes it all away. People look right through you now." Maria watched, feeling a fleeting pity, but mostly closure. Bailey was finally experiencing the world from the other side of the velvet rope. Her phone buzzed, a text from Matthew. "Proud of you, Peanut. Go change the world." Maria smiled, typed, "Already on it, Dad," and walked toward her gate. She didn't look back at the screen. She had a flight to catch, and the path ahead was wide open. That is the incredible, true-to-life story of how one moment of prejudice toppled a 20-year career. Bailey Miller thought she held all the cards. She thought she could judge a book by its cover, or in this case, a passenger by her hoodie. She didn't realize that the young woman she was bullying was the daughter of the one man who could ground every plane on the tarmac. It's a brutal lesson in karma. When you treat people with disrespect, you aren't just revealing their character, you're revealing your own. And in the age of digital footprints and accountability, that revelation can cost you everything. Bailey lost her job, her pension, and her freedom because she refused to see the human being standing in front of her. Maria, on the other hand, used that pain to fuel a journey that changed the entire industry. If you enjoyed this story of justice served cold, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a story. Have you ever been judged by your appearance while traveling or shopping? How did you handle it? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.